We are together with Mr. Daniel Nordholm, Managing Director of HBX Group.
Fintech for HBX Group, yes.
Fintech for HBX Group, and we are at the MarketHub conference here in Bangkok. We heard yesterday a very interesting presentation from one of your team members regarding the embedded insurance.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that, what it is?
Sure, and maybe first take a step back and from let's say from a macro perspective, what you see a big trend which is happening in travel hospitality at all is essentially embedded financial services, including embedded insurance services as well. And why this is really important is that we want to help this ecosystem to get into a position where they can essentially have all their access to various financial services, insurance services at the tip of a finger click. So essentially, instead of sourcing insurance from various providers, we would like them to be able to connect to us and then get all these services through the APIs and the connectivity they have with HBX.
So actually now the insurance is going to be included in the price, in the initial price, in the package that the customer is buying?
Yes, so obviously the customer will have a choice if they would like to opt in or not, but we see a very big trend that single trip insurance is on the rise. So pre-COVID to post-COVID, it's almost been a 2 to 3x factor of the adoption of the single trip insurance. And the reason for it, I think, is pretty obvious from COVID, because many people had bad experience during COVID.
Yeah, that was what exactly I wanted to ask. What led us to this?
So that's really, I think, the trend of this and why it is important. And yes, you have some level of protection from your bank insurance or from your credit card insurance, but what we are building is essentially targeted solutions for that specific trip you're doing. So if you're going on a skiing trip to Canada, we will make sure that you have the insurance for that length of the trip, that you're protected for the skiing, that you're protected for lost baggage if your skis get lost on the flight, etc., etc. So essentially get to tailor the insurance package for that specific trip you're doing instead of a general insurance that you typically have from your home insurance.
So your data shows you that we have increased cases of complaints the last period after COVID?
Yes, you had, especially in the beginning of the COVID pandemic when it happened, obviously there was a lot of cancellations and people might not have the right insurance protections for those cancellations. So they actually had bought the trip and they couldn't claim the money back because they didn't have any insurance policy regarding it. So it kind of created an awareness by the travelers that it's actually not a bad thing to be protected with an insurance which are specific for my specific trip that I'm going to take up here. And that's where I think you have seen the rise of the adoption of travel insurance during or post the COVID pandemic.
Do you see that it's an increasing trend that this service is added in all around the travel and hospitality industry, or is only to your systems?
No, I think it's a trend that it's added more. I think that the challenge for the, let's say, traditional insurance carriers company is essentially to have the reach out to the end travelers, and I think that's where we come into play in our network and the clients that we are connected to throughout the globe. We actually sit with these customers, we have the data points for these customers, so we can actually position that specific product in an easier way on behalf of that insurance carrier. So we are essentially their extended arm in order to position and help them to sell.
Is this a higher risk for the insurance companies? How does they respond to this?
I think it's actually less risk for them because we can provide a lot more data points for them when they are doing the, let's say, the underwriting policy for that specific insurance. Before they were very kind of generic and saying, okay, this is the persona, the profile of the person, where they go to, and this is, the product that we can offer you. Whereas we can add a lot more data into that, as my example with the skiing trip to Canada as an example. You have a lot more history of the traveler, you have, the exact booking, you have so much more data, so you can essentially be quite quick and accurate in the way you position that
So you
product.
can personalize the insurance
and
service.
you pay for what you need.
Okay.
You don't pay for all the extras that you might do in kind of a more classic insurance setup.
Okay. And in your department, you said that you are also dealing with the payments
Yes.
in the travel
Yeah.
hospitality
Yeah.
industry. And I heard in one of the presentations that the challenge is to bring the level of payments in the travel and hospitality industry the same experience like we've had in other industries.
Yes. No, it's very true, and I think there are a couple of key points here. One is that travel to some extent is seen as a bit of a high risk business for many payment companies because it is a time to consume event, right? You book something, but you consume that 4 months down the road or 6 months down the road. So there can be something happening in that period of time. So you need to manage your credit risk. You need to make sure that you obviously manage the customer or the consumer relationship during that period of time. So I think here is a good opportunity to essentially remove friction from this process, the payment process for the end travelers, but also from the business to business side. So if you look into a specific travel booking or traveler booking today, it actually undergoes multiple payment events. So you have the traveler, let's say they are booking through a travel agent. So that's one payment event. Traveler is paying the travel agent. Then the travel agent pay us as an intermediary. And then we pay the hotel. So it's actually 3 transactions in order to complete that initial booking. And there are different timings of it as well, because the consumer typically pay the travel agent directly most of the time. The travel agent pay us typically at check-in. We pay the hotel at check-in or check-out, depending on the agreement we have. So there, you need to kind of monitor and make sure that you have the timings right of all of these transactions happening as well.
And how about the loss that you may have in this transaction process due to currency changes?
Yeah,
or
so that's another very good point. So if you look into our transaction volume within HBX Group, 60%, 60, of all of our transactions undergo a currency exchange event. So US dollars to euro, or euro to Singapore dollars, or whatever it is. So obviously this is something that you need to have top of mind as well, because every time you are changing currency, it's a cost. And you can protect yourself against fluctuation by hedging, but hedging is a cost as well. So you need to start to optimize that whole value chain in order to make sure that you're essentially not leaking money on it throughout these transaction events.
So, and the last one, if I want to ask you, what will be the future trends in your area of expertise here?
I think it's a few things. I think that the most important thing here is that we want to make sure that the end traveler has a very good experience when they do payments. They should be able to pay in local currency. They should be able to use the payment method of their choice, whether it's a local wallet solution, whether it's a card-based solution, whether it's an account-to-account payment solution, and then essentially make sure that we optimize the way these payment steps are treated in the way, so we essentially keep that money or the essentially savings, that cost in the travel ecosystem, rather than to give it out into the various payment players and banks in the ecosystem. So we essentially want to take back what's ours in the industry.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.